Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome to my channel. If you are a subscriber returning, thank you, it means a lot. And if you're new, welcome. And I'm listening to the birds outside. I happen to be British by extraction, although I live in New Zealand. So you may hear the tui that's singing outside my window here. It's nearly spring here in the southern hemisphere. But I was born and raised in the UK, and part of the British tradition, or heritage I should say, was an empire and then eventually a commonwealth, of which India was the jewel in the crown. But in the latter part of the British rule in India, there was a lot of agitation for Indian nationhood. And if you happened to be caught with this book, you would have been considered a terrorist. Now it's staple reading for students in India. So what is this about? There's going to be quite a long run-up to explain the Bhagavad Gita and what I'm taking from it. And to do so, I think I need to explain a bit about Indian history, Hinduism, and the idea of God. But you could spend a lifetime studying those kind of concepts, and I'm going to try and do it in about 2 minutes. So anybody listening who knows far more than I do, please forgive me. I hope I get this right. To begin with, there is no Hindu religion. In the West, we've got quite lazy by saying anybody who lives beyond the Indus are Hindustanis, and therefore Indians, and therefore Hindus. And that's Hinduism, because there's a lot of schools in the subcontinent of India that we clump together, and they don't all agree on everything. What Indians themselves would say it's Sanatana Dharma, which could be interpreted in various ways, but it could also be the sacred law or the eternal law. And there's no doctrine or dogma in Hinduism. It's just competing thought that has developed over thousands of years. Some of the earliest were the Upanishads, which tended to be written by people in their forest years, it's called. They'd had their children, they'd had positions in towns and cities, and then gone off as recluses to study more about the universe and life, and written down their thoughts. Over time, in the Gangetic Plain and beyond, what was written was probably the longest piece of literature in world history, called the Mahabharata, which years ago I read some of, not all, and I get the feeling it's about two dueling families. But part of that are many Gitas, of which one is a standalone, or you can take it out of the Mahabharata and have it as personal study on its own. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita is. And the Bhagavad Gita, as you can see on the picture here, it's about a warrior. I'm assuming that's the warrior there, Arjuna, who is in a chariot, and he is dismayed to find out that the army he is about to fight has been made up primarily of his extended family. And although his duty, his Dharma, is to fight, he doesn't want to. And therefore discourses, to and fro conversations happen or begin, which effectively is what the Gita is, between himself and the man in the chariot called Krishna, who in this image is blue-skinned, because he is in fact God in human form. We don't find that out until I think the 9th or 10th discourse. And most people in the West have potentially heard of the Bhagavad Gita because of Oppenheimer, who after the war was interviewed about his role in making the atom bomb and the dropping of it. And he famously looked down like this and said a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, which is actually in the movie: "I have become death, the destroyer of worlds," if I got that right. Which is, if I remember, at the back end of the Bhagavad Gita. Starting to reread it, I've got as far as the first discourse. About that far in. So the Bhagavad Gita is about a man who's worried. This is no ordinary man. His father was a god, Indra. So in a way, it's almost Homeric that we're dealing with gods and mortals and semi-mortals, so to speak. And what should he do? And why should he go and fight? And that's what this is about. There's a couple of concepts that I've not yet mentioned. I think I should. But it's in the book. And again, I'll try and do my best to explain them. From the Indian mindset, there is God, Brahman, of which there's two other parts of it. It's like a tripartite, three-part God. There is Vishnu, which is the creative aspect, and then there is Shiva, which is the destructive aspect. That in itself is neutral. Like a flower has the creative aspect where it grows and blossoms, that's Vishnu. When it starts to wither and die, that's Shiva, because it needs to do that so that the nutrients go back into the ground so that it can regrow and blossom. There's this cycle. And that generally is roughly what is known as Brahman, the God. We ourselves all have a part of God in us called Atman. And what the Indian mindset has accepted over hundreds, thousands of years is that try and get to God through the use of the Atman by stilling or quieting the other aspects of us that resist that. There's Atman and there's Jiva. And both of them are like birds on a branch. Atman is the small, quiet contemplative part of it, and Jiva is the one that's always trying to get the attention. And you have to quieten Jiva so that Atman could then access God more clearly. How do you do that? Well, there's three potential ways, which are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. One is karma, which is the use of yoga, actions, things that you can do to distill your mind. Yoga to the ancients is not modern type yoga. It's not getting a fit bod. It's sitting down, using breathing and bodily postures so that you can release the mind to access better God. Or there's jnana, which is effectively, and I hope I've pronounced that correct, which is, again, renunciation, renouncing things in this world that aren't necessarily good for you. Too much wealth, too much honor, too much vanity, to access better God. The other way to get to know God, which is a lot of people have used the Bhagavad Gita for, is bhakti. And this is where Hare Krishna comes in, the Krishna movement, who look at Krishna as a God in human form and saying that's the kind of thing that we should devote our attention to. The purity of Krishna that's revealed in the Bhagavad Gita. There is Dharma. What is this about, really? You could argue it's nearly all about Dharma. Sacred duty. Well, what is Dharma? I remember when I was studying this at university, someone mentioned a quote from Martin Luther King that really exemplifies or explains what Dharma is. And it's contained in the foreword of this book. Yeah. So this is what Martin Luther King said. It was in Philadelphia in 1967. And he spoke of a street sweeper's relationship to God. And I'll give a direct quotation. If it falls to your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like, I have no idea who this is, Leontyne Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. That's Dharma. So Arjuna, in his chariot, has to be the best warrior he possibly can. That's his station in life. That's what he is. And if he has to fight his family, so be it. The universe wants him to fulfill his duty. And it's the same for all of us. The beauty of reading the Bhagavad Gita is it's saying this is what Arjuna's duty is, but what's our duty? If we were in similar positions, what is our duty? What's the duty of being a grandfather, like I am now, or a father, or a brother, or a son, or a friend? We all have our Dharma to fulfill. They're all competing, but we must fulfill them to the best that we can. So if you're at work and you don't like it, do the best that you can. So no one would ever know that you can't stand working there. You just have to fulfill your sacred duty, Dharma. There's also the Dharma of honouring one's elders, one's parents and teachers. Think of the world today, whether that happens. Think about whether we honour guests, we honour people from abroad, whether we honour ourselves. And this Dharma really hangs on what's called Varna. It's our station in life. Where are we? Where are we? Now, when I read this, and this is where it says the station in life, the first thing that came to my mind was, of course, Dharma, well, how can we disagree with it? I mean, it makes sense. But it has been abused in Indian history. Dalits, untouchables, are born into grinding poverty, but they have to accept it, because that's what God supposedly wants. And the Bhagavad Gita and all Indian literature argues the case that if you try to get out of your Dharma, outside of your station in life, it just leads to chaos. And that's not good for anybody, including the universe. And that banging of the door is to emphasize that, no doubt. Now, I've come to the end of the first discourse, and there's just a few little things I'd like to highlight about the discourse itself. It's not necessarily from Arjuna's perspective, although it goes to there. It starts off with Dhritarashtra talking to a Sanjaya, who then talk about Arjuna and Krishna. So the perspective changes. And Krishna, the son of Madhu, and Arjuna, the son of Pandu, both blew their divine conch horns. So we've got this setting that a lot of the stuff may go over your head because it's a tradition that's no longer with us. And some of the use of names for Krishna and Arjuna seem to reflect on their hair. Long-haired Arjuna, bristling-haired Krishna, and so on. So this is the crux of why this is happening. Arjuna saw fathers and then grandfathers standing there, teachers, mothers, brothers, sons, grandsons, and friends too, fathers-in-law and companions of strong heart in both armies. He breaks down with deep compassion and he says to Krishna, Krishna, now that I have seen my own people here coming near and longing to fight, my legs collapse. My mouth is parched, my body trembles, and my hair bristles. I see no good in killing my people in battle. It's quite easy to read. No doubt it has lost a lot from the original Sanskrit, but it's still powerful. I don't want to kill them, he says, even for the kingship of the three worlds, and certainly not for the earth. Mover of men, he's saying to Krishna, what joy would it be for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra? After we had killed our own people, how would we take pleasure? The wrong done by the destruction of family. And then here's the key. In the destruction of family, the eternal Dharma of family perishes. When Dharma perishes, its absence also conquers the whole family. Those humans whose Dharma has vanished will live forever in hell. Oh, we are set upon doing a great harm. We are eager to kill our own people, all for the sake of pleasure and a kingdom. But it's Dharma. And then the whole rest of the Bhagavad Gita goes into various reasons as to why Arjuna should do as is expected. It's an easy read, but the concepts you have to have in the back of your mind while you're reading it. And also understand that in the modern world, some of the things that are discussed aren't necessarily easy to understand at first. It's not very long. There's 14, 15 discourses. And towards the end is that great reveal, which is a magnificent vision of Krishna, bigger than the universe and so on and so forth. But I'll talk about that in a future episode. So to answer the question, what is this about? It's about Dharma. And that is something, obviously, as relevant today as it was when it was written so many years ago. So hopefully I've done justice to what the book is about, and I'll carry on reading and talk about it in a future episode. Well, until then, thanks for listening.